Hello, and I welcome you to this episode of our public enlightenment series on our ICAN-ngr program. Today, we examine the subject strategy design and execution in times of uncertainty, what we professional accountants should know, and what friends of accountants who are in business should know. Of course, we talk about strategy, planning, and uncertainty as being intertwined in a realistic framework where companies and organizations are bounded to develop and compete in a world dominated by complexity, ambiguity, and uncertainty, in which naturally unpredictable, unstoppable, and sometimes meaningless, yes, meaningless circumstances may have a direct impact on expected outcomes. Joining me in a question and answer segments of this program to, as you were, tie the dots, dots the I's, cross the T's for our professional understanding is Mr. Kayode Omorege, FCA. Mr. Omorege has had over 3 decades, so yes, 30 years of experience in professional practice and has had roles, including board level appointments and engagements at very high level. A very widely published author in the academic and professional journals. Mr. Kayode Omorege is a senior fellow at the Lagos Business School, where he engages in research, teaching in finance and strategy. More to unveil digitally on our esteemed guests very soon. And also on this segment of our program on Ankel here today, we let you into a bit of our diary of events, some things that we believe you should kindly take note of. Have a few adverts we are going to show you. Overall, it's going to be scintillating, knowledge sharing, education all the way. Also, please stay tuned, stay connected. We shall be back with you shortly. Oh, yes. Thank you for still tuned up. And let me welcome Mr. Kayode Omorege, FCA, onto ICAN-ngr program today. Welcome, Mr. Kayode Omorege.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick. I'm happy to be here. It's nice to see that you're looking well. Wow.
I tell you, you look well. That's what ICAN has done to us. Despite all the odds, look well, look your best for the challenges ahead. And so I go straight into business. And I know I have a couple of our students who are tuned in. I know we have friends of accountants, accounting profession who are also tuned in. I am aware we have engineers, we have lawyers, and we have members of the Institute of Directors who are tuned in. And usually, in setting the framework for this subject, talking about strategy, design, execution in times of uncertainty, what we should know, I like us to frame it without assumptions into few definition of terms. They help us and set the tone for the whole topic that we are going to be looking at today. And so I start. Mr. Omorege, what is strategy? And in scope, what does a strategy entail?
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question. Yeah. Strategy, from an academic perspective, it's a fairly, difficult concept to define. You have a lot of academics with their different takes and perspective on what strategy is all about. But because we're practitioners here, we're going to adopt a practice-based approach to it, understanding what strategy really is, so we can engage with the subject and hopefully can get something that we can run with and implement. Strategy, from the perspectives about how you compete on a sustainable basis within the context of your industry and trying to achieve your objectives over the long run. But then if we define strategy within the context of just competition, we may be shortchanging ourselves. And so in terms of the scope of what strategy entails, it's a whole series of decisions, processes, operations that enables you to decide on what kind of opportunities you want to pursue, what kind of markets you want to serve, what kind of products and services you want to supply to that market, the nature of the organizational structure, your business processes, both internal and external, that you want to deploy so that you can serve these customers successfully within the context of the competition and the circumstances that surround your business. In other words, the external and internal context of your organization. So, in very simple terms, strategy is about developing a series of plans of actions that enables you to deliver a particular goods and services to your target market while also responding to the challenges posed by your competition and also the vicissitudes of the environment in which you're doing business.
Thank you very much. That sounds like terminologies that we hear nearly every day in markets, competition, and what you want to achieve. I'd like you to please, if you can, and I think you should be able to do this for us. Can you elucidate on the place of strategy in tackling competition?
Well, first and foremost, we define competition in this context as those industry peer groups, or in fact, other players who are not necessarily in your core industry, who are competing for the same markets, for the same customers that you are trying to serve, either using products similar to your own or products that can substitute for the products that you are delivering to your own market. That's competition. And so every business person understands that in any industry you find yourself, even no matter how unique you think your product or services, once you start, somebody sees that there is something to be done here. Before you know it, you have competition coming in to try to also compete, try to also get a share of that market. And like we said, competition today has extended beyond just those who are competing for products and services vis-a-vis the clients you're trying to serve or the customers you're trying to serve. Competition now extends to people who are competing for share of pockets, because at the end of the day, you're exchanging goods and services with a market that have a limited, funds to disburse, and they also want to disburse these funds for other products and services. So you're trying to ensure that you're engaging with your clients in such a way that you're capturing the maximum share of pocket, the funds they have to spend. Whereas some other, players are also trying to compete for that same share of the pocket. So competition can come in the way of those who are competing for, who are trying to get a share of your market, or who are trying to get a share of the funds that your market is able to spend on your own products and services. Now, what does competition strategy help you do in this context? We should begin to think of strategy at this point, not about trying to be the best, because the mindset of most people who play in an industry is that if you're the best at what you do, then you will win the game. Not necessarily so. Let me give you an example. If you are in the automobile industry and you ask yourself a question, you produce cars, you sell cars. The question I will ask is, which is the best car? Is it a Mercedes Benz? Is it a BMW? Is it a Maserati? Is it the Volks? The question is, being the best is really not the objective of strategy, because there really is no best per se. What strategy helps you do in the context of competition is help you deliver a unique set of services or products to a target market. And so because you are uniquely delivering something that satisfies that market, you have a captive market. And so BMW may not be the best car in the world, or it may be, but for your target market, for those who appreciate the BMW, you have the best thing they want. So you're not competing with the Volkswagen anymore, you're not competing with Maserati, because you have a captive market, because that brand, that BMW, is delivering a unique set of attributes that satisfies those who like those things that you're delivering. So strategy enables you set boundaries for yourself as a business in terms of what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and how you should do it, so that you continue to capture your market, retain your market, on a sustainable basis, and in a profitable manner. Because strategy without profit is pretty much useless. So that's pretty much what strategy helps you do within the context of competition.
I listened to you just now, and I noticed we were talking about boundaries. Of course, within boundaries, there must naturally be rules. Otherwise, if there are no rules, if there are no boundaries, we get into autarky, a state of nature, as it were. Can you help us to frame what are these strategic boundaries and what are these rules of competitive engagement?
Okay. There are no explicit, rules of engagement per se, other than in business, you need to pay fairly and ethically. You need to be delivering goods and services that meet certain regulatory standards. And when you are communicating to your clients that you're delivering something, then you need to be delivering those things. When you are competing, you need to be fair to your competition. You need to be fair to your customers. You need to be fair to the environment itself. So those are certain kinds of boundaries that should inform the way you do business, and they must be embedded in your strategy. Strategy must have an ethical bias. It must have a regulatory and compliance bias. Now that said, there are certain self-imposed boundaries that any business person should have, what we call strategic boundaries. So, as we said earlier, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that a good strategy should help you do is to help you clearly define what you want to do and what you do not want to do, and how you want to do those things. In other words, let me give you a fairly generic example. When a company like MTN, if you ask anybody what does MTN do, they will tell you that MTN is a telecoms company. But you will understand quite clearly that telecoms is an omnibus, term that has a very extensive value chain. So there are different kinds of people that play on that telecoms value chain. You have those who make the handsets, there are those who are original equipment manufacturers, there are those who build base stations, there are those who build microchips, and so on and so forth. So on that, wide spectrum of the value chain in the telecom sector, you can choose to play on a particular segment or some part of that segment. For an MTN, for example, they play, for now at least, all the GSM spectrum. In other words, the current thing they do up to recently, it's they enable people to make calls, to send text messages, and to exchange data. That's where they play. And that definition of the space, the scope of their play, is a delineation of their boundaries, which is defined by their mission, okay, which has also defined their corporate strategy, right from their head office and those who envision that business called MTN. So when MTN came to Nigeria some 20 years ago, it was playing in that space. Now, let's assume that the CEO of MTN at that time felt that, you know what, the competition in this business is too high, we're not making enough money. But there appears to be a lot of money, to be made in selling bottled water. The question is, can MTN, given the boundaries it has set for itself by virtue of strategy and the niche it has defined for itself on the telecom value chain, can it at that time begin to play in the bottled water industry? Possibly no, because it has set the boundaries for itself. That's what we mean by your strategy will define for you where you can play and where you cannot play. Sometimes those boundaries are fairly flexible within the context of the mission that you set for yourself, so you can extend into related industries. We call that diversification. And diversification can be related or it could be unrelated. But within certain boundaries, we're clear as to where you can play and where you will not play. That's what we mean by boundaries in another sense. Another way you conceive boundaries in strategy is how you compete. Let's take an industry that has, say, two or three dominant players. Now, let's say we could take the beverage industry in Nigeria, the beer, alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverage industry in Nigeria. Up to about, say, 12 years or so ago, it was essentially a duopoly in Nigeria. In other words, we had two dominant players, against Nigeria, and of course, the Nigerian breweries. Now, those two were dominant, but they have gotten to a point in the way they play their game that they will not comfort each other directly, try to deliberately and overtly steal market share from each other because they respect their boundaries. And so each of them have defined certain boundaries in terms of the products that they're selling, in terms of their brand portfolio, and in terms of the markets they're trying to target. And so they will not overtly try to encroach into the territory of another person. Once they do that, when they start all sorts of gimmicks in terms of undercutting prices, undercutting quality, they know they will destroy that industry for themselves in total. And so they get to a point where there's a mutual respect for each other, even though we're both dominant, and we call that co-opetition. Rather than competition, it's cooperation in competition. And so these are some of the ways in which we must understand what we call by boundaries or the rules of the game when we envisage, an implement strategy.
Yes, thank you very much for that delineation. And I think clearly we should be clear as to the what. I mean, we now then go into the how. How? Um, for instance, very much like to ask you, what are the precedents to strategy formulation, and indeed, what are the different types of strategies that you could share with us?
Another very good question, Mr. Patrick. Okay, let's talk about some of the precedents to strategy. In other words, what must precede the formulation strategy. Again, because of the very, ubiquitous nature of strategy within the context of how businesses operate, you really can't set a beginning point and an end point for strategy. Strategy is exactly what an organization does. Every other thing that we do in business, our operations, our financing, our people, our processes, is just by a way of operationalizing or implementing our strategy towards achieving certain objectives. So strategy is really what we do as an organization. So what should precede your conception, your design and your execution strategy? It essentially starts from understanding what your values are as a visionary, as somebody who wants to venture or wants to start something. You need to be clear about what your values are, what you stand for, and also what your core competencies are. Your competencies that are innate, competencies that you can learn, or competencies that you can acquire through partnerships, collaborations, or what have you. So having defined what your values are, your values will help you understand what's your mission, what we call your raison d'etre strategy. You help you define what your mission is as an entity. What do you want to accomplish? I want to make people happy. I want to connect people. I want to minimize the spread of disease. I want to give people the best kind of food experience. That defines your mission as a person. Now, having defined your values, having defined your core competencies, having defined your mission, that enables you to determine what kind of opportunities you want to pursue and what kind of objectives you want to achieve within the context of those opportunities that you define for yourself. Having defined and identified that opportunity, then I begin to think of how to develop products that will meet certain market groups within that opportunity domain that you identify for yourself, what kind of business configuration will serve you, how you finance the project, how you grow, how you resource in terms of your people, processes, collaborations, and what have you. And so essentially the first thing that should precede your study formation is the sense of who you are as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a visionary. So this is what I want to do. This is what I'm capable of doing. And even if I don't have the skills, these are the skills I can acquire through collaboration or through training. And then this predisposes me to capturing some kind of opportunity and being very good at exploiting that opportunity for my own benefit, for the benefit of my markets, my customers, and for the benefit of society at large.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omorege. In business, in accounting, in finance, of course, we all talk about the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity, and if you may, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, that foremost institute, we would like to also add um, disruption. And so we talk about the VUCA or the VUCAD, as the case might be. I'd like to have your opinion on the use of strategy within the context of this VUCA or VUCAD and the new normal.
Okay. Thank you again. A very, very important question. But if I can crave your indulgence, you did ask me a second question. I don't think I touched on that about what are the types of strategies that we have.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't mind me just touching on that very briefly, then I'll
Oh, please. Step back.
scenario.
Yes.
Yeah, so in terms of types of strategy, sometimes people confuse that language types of strategy with what we call levels of strategy. So and they tend to mix up the two. So I'm going to explain what levels of strategy is and then what types of strategy can be. So levels of strategy, to a large extent, the academics and practitioners are agreed that there are three levels of strategy. We have what we call corporate strategy, we have what we call business strategy, we have what we call functional or operational level strategy. Now, what is corporate strategy? That's, for a company that is more than one unit, corporate strategy simply defines who you are as an organization, what you want to pursue, where you want to play, which market you want to serve, which kind of products and services you want to use to serve that market, how you want to finance your growth, how you want to grow, whether you want to grow organically, whether you want to grow by acquisitions, whether you want to grow through franchising. These are all the elements that defines you as a corporate entity and sums up what your corporate strategy is and what you want to do, how you want to do it, who you want to do it for, okay, and how you want to make money. That's corporate level strategy. Now, having defined the corporate level strategy, the next level of strategy is the business or competitive strategy. In other words, how do I want to play in the markets in which I have chosen to play in? Whether it's a local market, whether it's an international market, how do I want to play? And essentially, the elements that you're playing around with within the context of your business or competitive strategy are things around your brand image, in terms of your product customization, in terms of your pricing, in terms of your cost structure, what kind of people you want to engage, how you want to engage them, how you want to, the channels you want to use to get your products and services to your various markets. These are some of the elements that defines what we call business strategy. So anytime companies are competing against each other within a particular narrow product niche, or market niche, they are only competing around packaging, around pricing, around production technology, around people, around image, around cost structures and things of that nature. And that's what we call business level strategy. The third level of strategy is your functional strategy or your operational strategy. If you look at the way this is configured, A business is an aggregate of different functional units. So you have, marketing function, production function, finance function, logistics function, HR, legal, and so on and so forth, depending on how complex the operation is or how it is designed. Now, each of these functional units just have one responsibility to help you implement certain elements of your business strategy, which itself is an arrangement for implementing your corporate level strategy within a defined market or competitive domain. So you must be able to translate your business level strategy into a strategy for HR, a strategy for marketing, a strategy for finance, a strategy for logistics, and so on and so forth. That's why you hear people talk about an HR strategy. You have a marketing strategy, you have a sales strategy, you have a production strategy, and so on and so forth. So those are the three levels of strategy: corporate level strategy, and business or competitive level strategy, and of course the functional or operational level strategy. Now, in terms of types of strategies, okay, there are different types. We have different names, and you can choose to name your strategy any which way you like. But Michael Porter helped us, distill all of these types of strategy into three major domains or pillars. You can actually compete on the basis of costs, structure. You can compete on the basis of product differentiation, or you can compete on the basis of which kind of markets you want to focus, which kind of markets you want to serve. And so we have what we call a cost leadership strategy. You know what? I want to be able to deliver my products and services to my customers at the lowest cost possible. To a large extent, you're competing on the basis of price. And so you are trying to design an organization that ensures that you can deliver your products and services at a reasonably low cost without compromising too much on quality. Which means that everything around your functional strategy is geared towards ensuring that there's operational efficiency in HR, in logistics, in production, so that your cost is as low as possible. That is cost leadership strategy. Then there's of course the differentiation strategy. In this case, you're not so much bothered about cost. You should be, but that's not your primary focus. Your focus is to deliver a differentiating experience, whether it's a product you're delivering, whether it's a service you're delivering. You want to offer a service that differentiates you from your competition. And sometimes these kind of strategy puts you at a premium type position. And so the channels through which you sell your products, for example, is different from somebody who might be selling the same products but pursuing a cost leadership strategy. I give you a very simple example. You could buy, say, a kilo of beef, at the market in Sandros. You could buy that same kilo of meat, at a highbrow shop in say Ikeja, maybe ShopRite or wherever you, and the prices are different. Effectively, you're buying the same product, but because it's packaged differently, it's displayed differently, it's branded differently, it's sold differently, and so it's you have used all those attributes of the place, the position, the package, the branding, the pricing to differentiate that product from that same exact kind of core product that's being sold in a less upscale market. So we say you're competing on the basis of differentiation. And then, of course, that's what we call focus. You say, I don't want to be a mass market, type brand. I just want to focus on a niche. I want to serve those who discern and appreciate what I'm trying to sell to them. And that's why, for example, you could say to a large extent a car like, I don't know, a Toyota, okay, it straddles. It has a very broad market base and, that's fragmented its market into different niches. But a car like the Bugatti or the Maserati is meant for a few client base. Just say Rolls Royce. I'm told that even if you have the money on hand, you have to book for about 3 to 4 years before you can get, a brand new Rolls Royce. That is, focus. That is differentiation. And so these are the different kinds of strategy. You compete on the basis of cost, you compete on the basis of, market focus, or you compete on the basis of differentiation. So I hope that came across quite well. So back to the question you asked about VUCA. One of the things about strategy is that you must understand that strategy operates within a context. There's an external context, there's an internal context. Now, VUCA is more about the external context and how it should inform what you do internally in response to those externalities. And so when we talk about VUCA, we're talking about volatility, we're talking about uncertainty, we're talking about complexity, we're talking about ambiguity. And what's all those variables around you, policy issues, technology issues, price issues, inflation, interest rate, Those things are the macroeconomic parameters that defines the context in which the business operates. Where, for example, these variables change with such rapidity, with such frequency, and with such profound impact, we say that environment is very, very volatile. In other words, you see oil prices, or commodity prices fluctuating day in, day out. You see exchange rate fluctuating day in, day out. You see, interest rate fluctuating and so on and so forth. You see policy changes here and there. When you operate in that kind of a context, you say you're operating in a very fairly volatile context. Now, if you add that to uncertainty, uncertainty means things happen, but we don't even know when or why or where they're happening. The policy changes, government changes, regulation changes, the consumer dynamics or demographics change, these kind of uncertainties, you add that to volatility, then you talk about ambiguity. Things happen, we're not even clear where they're happening. We're not sure about what these changes in and of themselves mean. And of course, we talk about complexity. You're dealing with different variables, different issues, hitting you and your business at the same time. When we put all these things together, it just means that the environment in which you are operating is very unstable. Instability also means there's a heightened level of risk. And if you look at the trend, the global trend, because we now live in a global world, even things that happen in faraway Ukraine, it's impacting us here in Nigeria. So in that kind of a world, we say we're living in a VUCA world. And more often than not, this is the new normal. The question is, how do companies survive within that kind of uncertain, volatile, and ambiguous, and complex environment? That's VUCA in a nutshell.
Excellent. I am enthused by your enumeration of the different types of strategies we have, whether it is cost, whether it's differentiation, and whether it's niche. Thank you very much. So, having said all what we have said, okay, maybe a bit theoretical. We know definition of terms. We know the what. We know the how. We know the boundaries. We know what next, and of course, we know what's the VUCA. And don't forget, I added the D, the disruption has brought into place. Let's go into the laboratory. Let's go a bit practical. Can you provide us a bit of an industry analysis framework when you are formulating strategies?
Okay. Now, when we conceive strategy, more often than not, we make the assumption that over a certain period of time, there will be some level of predictable trends and stability. That is the old normal, as it were. In the context of VUCA, we don't have that luxury. We need to plan for the unexpected. But I'll come to that. So let's think about formulating strategy within what is a fairly stable and predictable context. Michael Porter, pretty much gave us a tool that helps us, formulate strategy in that context. Because at the end of the day, especially for a company that has a profit orientation, you want to be able to make money in any venture that you find yourself in. And so we remember at the onset, we did say that one of the key aspects of strategy is trying to define for yourself the opportunities you want to pursue that are consistent with your values and with your core competencies. Now, in trying to decide which opportunity or which industry you want to play, you need to be asking yourself, how profitable really is this industry? Can I make money, from this venture that I want to get myself into? And so you should ask yourself, what kind of variables, what kind of structures, what kind of things can inform whether an industry is potentially profitable or otherwise. So Michael Porter gave us this tool called the 5 forces framework. And it says there are 5 essential key elements that we look at. And we'll look at it in practical terms now. So those 5 elements are what he calls the barrier to entry. The second one he calls the intensity of existing rivalry in that industry. The third one he calls the availability or the presence of substitutes to the product or services you want to offer. He talked about the bargaining power of suppliers and the bargaining power of buyers. Let's take each one of those variables and apply them to two different entities or two different industries so we can get the point clearer in practical terms. So what is barrier to entry? Barrier to entry simply means what are those factors or variables that makes it difficult for you as a new entrant to be able to enter an industry and play in that industry. Let's take the example of, say, the telecoms industry, GSM, service providers, for example. What are some of the barriers to entry here? It's extremely capital intensive. It's very asset intensive. It requires a lot of high level skills. It involves a lot of regulation hurdles that you need to licensing regimes. So what can we say? The barrier to entry is quite what? High.
Hi.
It's not easy for you as you and I to say, hey, let's wake up, we want to get into that industry. Now, because the barrier to entry is high, it means that those who are already in that industry are shielded from additional competition. And so the finite pool of profit that is there is preserved for the few players that are playing there. So the higher the barrier to entry, all things being equal, the potentially more profitable that industry is. Now let's talk about the second element, which is the intensity of existing rivalry. Take that same sector in Nigeria, telecom sector, the GSM sector. There are four dominant players there in Nigeria. Okay, and because there are four, dominant players, they pretty much like normalize their competitive terrain. And so what's there for them is enough pickings for them, and they're just, competing with themselves in a benign fashion, no hostile, competition. And there are no new entrants coming in to compete with them. And so the pool of profit is fairly well preserved. Are there substitutes to you and I making calls or sending text messages? None, really. And so we really have to use the service. Again, that preserves the profitability of that industry. You and I cannot, bargain with them much about the price of their products or their service. We just take what they offer us. Okay? Again, that means they can push prices to us. They can give us a price and we are stuck with it. Same story with those who are supplying them with the goods and services because of their dominant, position in the industry. So if you look at those five, variables for the telecoms industry, they are quite benign, and so profitability is high in that sector. High barrier to entry, low intensity of existing rivalry, non-availability of substitutes, low bargaining power for the suppliers, low bargaining power for the buyers. Now let's take another industry, and then compare using those same variables. Take, for example, the hairdressing industry. What would you say about the profitability of that industry in Nigeria? Clearly extremely low. Why? Barrier to entry is what? It's extremely low. Anybody can wake up tomorrow and say wants to be a hairdresser. How much does it take to buy a dryer, open a shop, buy a generator, and you're in business? And that's why you go on any street in Lagos, there are 3 or 4 or 5 hairdressing salons, and so commission is high. There are so many people already playing there. Because you have options and substitutes, people can, price in different ways. And so if you look at those frameworks, it helps you define, okay, which industries are potentially profitable or which ones are not. So that's one very robust tool for helping you when you want to start into a venture. Ask yourself, what is the barrier to entry? What is the nature of competition that's there right now? Are there substitutes to what I'm trying to deliver? Okay, and are there, how well can I pass prices to my customers? How much can I deflect prices for my suppliers? If those issues are positive, then that's a potentially profitable industry for you to want to go into.
Super. Thank you very much. The barriers to entry, and then going it from bottoms up, how you can pass prices where competition is not choking you, and where regulation is not choking you. But can you provide us the environmental scanning dimension to strategy formulation very briefly?
Yeah. Well, very briefly, all you remember studies again about once you even decided on which industry you want to play and you're already there. Remember that all the variables that makes an industry attractive or otherwise are not static. Everything is constantly moving and constantly changing. And so, what is environmental scanning in simple terms? It's about keeping an eye on what is going on around you with regulatory issues, with your competitive issues, with your customer dynamics. How are their tastes changing? Okay, how is government regulation changing? What are the new things that your competition is doing? All the process that you put in place for getting this information from outside of your business and processing them and responding to them what we call environmental scanning in very
I see.
simple terms.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And if you just joining, this is ICAN on air. One of the positive disruptions that the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria has brought to the doorsteps of Nigerians and those in the diaspora. We are operating on the same charter with new chapters. Today, we're looking at strategy design and execution in terms of uncertainties. What we, students, professionals, and practitioners, should know, and I'll be fielding questions to Mr. Kayode Omorige, FCA, the great, fantastic job at it. If you have questions, please send them across. We will try, no matter how small, in time to tackle them for your satisfaction. Mr. Omorigi, how do we evaluate corporate strategy?
Okay, at the end of the day, like we pointed out, strategy has certain elements, and strategy is at some level is a very conceptual thing. You can have a good strategy on paper, but you fail when you execute it and so on and so forth. But at the minimum, your strategy must have at least 5 elements. So you must ask yourself, having designed this strategy, is it clear? Is my strategy clear about what opportunities I want to pursue and why? Is it clear about what kind of products I want to offer, to which markets, at what price, in what locations? We call that the arena dimension of strategy. So your strategy must be clear about the arena in which you want to play. The other elements for evaluating your strategy is what we call the vehicle, or the organizational structure, the processes that you put in place. Are those processes, those vehicles, are they consistent with the kind of product and services and the markets you are trying to serve? You know, are they clear about the kind of competencies that you need to be able to have to deliver on the positioning in which you have chosen for yourself within the context of your strategy? That's the second thing you need to ask yourself to understand whether you have a strategy or not. The third thing is what we call differentiation. Is remember we said earlier at the beginning of this program that strategy is not necessarily about being the best, but it's about delivering a unique set of services or products to a unique clientele base. So the question is my strategy, is it sufficiently differentiating me from my competition and is helping me deliver a unique set of services to my chosen market? If you think you are clear on that, then you can move on to the next phase. The next thing here is strategy is a plan, if you like, that must be unfolded over a certain period of time. You need to know how you want to stage your entry and how you want to unfold your strategy over a period of time. And so once you're clear about that, whether it's clear timelines, benchmarks, a smart action, plan, then say you have a good strategy. But the most important element, perhaps one of the most important elements, is that your strategy must have what you call an economic or financial logic. In other words, you must ask yourself, can I make money with this strategy? How? So your strategy must be clear about its revenue streams you're anticipating. Your strategy must be clear about the cost structure. Your strategy must be clear about the cash flow patterns that will, evolve as a result of faithfully implementing the strategy. And the strategy must be clear about the flexibility of your financing structure. And so at this point, you really cannot connect strategy from the financial plans of the business. So those are the 5 domains that you must ask yourself as to whether or not you have a strategy or not. Another point I need to make here very quickly, because since we're talking about strategy within the context of uncertainty, how do you deal with all this uncertainty within the context of your strategy? Well, one useful tool that we can use is what we call scenario planning. Okay, it's a very useful and powerful tool. It's been around for a while, but now it's gaining ascendancy again because of this VUCA context in which we find ourselves. And what is scenario planning? It's about envisioning over a period of time, okay, what kind of future scenarios can evolve. So you look at certain parameters that defines your industry, that defines your context. Things like, political scenarios, technology issues, economic variables, and so on and so forth. And you ask yourself, what are the possible things that can happen over a certain period of time, from the best case to the worst case scenario. And then you have to have contingent buckets of plans, to unfold when any one of those scenarios are evolving. In other words, you build a robust flexibility so that any kind of thing that your environment throws at you, you have a plan to respond. One of the reasons why companies fail when there are abrupt changes in the environment because you don't have a sufficient enough robust or flexible plan of action to respond to different things that comes their way. So a useful tool that can help you deal with strategy in uncertainty is robust environmental scanning, proper scenario planning, and evaluating those elements of the strategy in terms of where you want to play, how you want to play, the vehicle you are playing with, and whether the strategy is sufficiently unique, differentiates you, and it has economic or financial logic.
Awesome. Simply say awesome, Mr. Omorige. I'll pull you by the shirt just a little. And let us look very briefly. I know time is not a friend. That when we want to formulate financial strategies, uh, how really do we integrate the financial policies and procedures?
With our core strategy. A very good question, Mr. Patrick. One of the things, I've been involved in strategy formation and financial planning for quite a while. One of the things that I noticed is that people treat strategy as distinct from financial planning. You can't. Because at the core, the strategy is, a means of trying to unlock, financial potentials of the business, if you like. That's one way to look at it. And if your strategy is not clear about, its connection to its financial implications for the business, then you started failing already from the very beginning. Sometimes you have a conceptually good strategy, but you have a very poor financial strategy to implement it. So every strategy is a choice. It's a choice about how you want to play. It's a choice about the kind of assets you want to put in place. It's a choice about the kind of processes you want to put in place and so on and so forth. Now, all these choices have robust financial implications. They have robust cash flow implications. Okay? Right. And so if your capital structure, if your financial plan does not understand and address the financial implications of your strategy. For example, the strategy may be one that does not deliver cash flow in the short term, okay, but delivers sharp cash flow in the long term. Meanwhile, you're trying to support that strategy with a lot of debt on the onset that involves you paying out interest. Meanwhile, your business strategy is not involving cash flow. Already you started to fail because you'll be paying interest to, with cash flows that you don't have, sinking you further into debt. In very simple terms, your strategy must have economic logic, which means that there must be some connection, integration between the core strategy and your financial strategy so that everything can work out as you intend going forward.
Super, super, super. And then, of course, we started with it from the cradle. We should be getting to the grave. One of the terminologies that I know is that the graveyard of strategy is execution, your capacity to be able to execute it well. And because without execution, strategy just becomes a dream, pipe dream. Please, can you provide us just very briefly as we move towards the end of this question and answer session? Insight into strategy execution imperatives.
In very simple terms, strategy execution is the responsibility of the leadership of the organization. Like rightly pointed out, strategy without proper execution, you're just wasting your time. And one reason why people fail in execution is that during the process of conceiving strategy, they are not thinking about the implications for execution in real time. You have to think about those two things in parallel. So in very simple terms, I have this framework, which at some point we could share with the institute a link to the video that summarizes this framework. There are 4 critical elements that can help you with strategy execution. The first thing is having a dissatisfaction for the status quo. The leaders must let, the strategy is about trying to do things differently. That's one way to look at strategy. But you must be able to convince people that there is a need to do things differently. And so that's what we call ensuring that you get people to understand that where we are today is not the best place. We need to move forward. So visioning something better than where you are. The second thing about strategy formulation is being able to have a process in place that immediately ties you to committed, milestones, things that need to be done, a series of activities, if you like. So strategy must be programmatic. You must be able to break down strategy into critical tasks, and you must be able to assign those tasks to people who are responsible for delivering on those tasks at some point in time. So in other words, you must have champions of change within your organization that can help you take those elements of the strategy that you parceled out and ensure that it's executed and everything is integrated at the back end. So it's about creating a dissatisfaction with the status quo. It's about ensuring that you create a vision of where people want to go to. It's about having a process, for ensuring that you deal with strategy in a programmatic manner. And finally, it's about rewarding people for doing what they need to do at the time they need to do it. Celebrating, quick wins so that that momentum for execution is sustained within the organization.
Mr. Morige, talking about appointing champions, we in the Institute of Chartered Accountants were enthused when our president paid a courtesy call to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mr. Muhammadu Buhari, and he singled us out and said, with the kind of discipline that we have, the kind of rigor that he's been told, see that accountants possess, the champions that Nigeria should be looking at will be members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. I can't forget that. Also, may we have your parting shots on this subject, Mr. Moriki?
Well, to this extent, I will have to agree with the president. I've been in the institute for quite a while, and long before I came here, I've always, admired accountants, and I'm proud to be one today. I'm also proud of the current leadership of the institute and how they're trying to engage with, very pragmatic issues within society. And so remember, one of the creeds of our institute is professionalism and integrity. Those are in fact the kind of skills, attributes that we need to help this country move forward. And so I want to commend ICAN with what they're doing. I want to ask the leadership continue to do what they're doing, continue to improve the quality of the training so that the kind of accountants that we are, the kind of professionals we are, certifying, at the cutting edge. But so I'm quite happy with what ICAN is doing. And I'm also quite proud about what you yourself are doing. I've known you for quite a while, and even though we haven't seen each other for quite a while, I'm so proud of what you're doing. This is a very beautiful program. I think it's a way of trying to get our professionals and also non-professionals who are interested in what we do to understand, emerging issues that are going on in society today and in practice. So I commend the institute, I commend you, and I wish you all the very, very best in what you're doing.
We can't thank you well enough. And you can be sure, Mr. Omorege, they're going to be calling on you in future. I'd like to also thank you for the insightful answers you have given to some of our questions. I can see the students giving kudos, ready tips for them to pass their exams. And back on that, may I quickly, part of what I have on the ICAN diary is that the ICAN May 2022 professional exams is now going to hold between May 10 and May 12, 2022. The earlier schedule was May 17 to May 19, but now it's holding May 10. Okay? So May 12, 2022. Another important announcement is that the 69th induction ceremonies for ICAN now holds between May 24 and 25, 2022. It was earlier scheduled for May 9 and 10, 2022. Please take notes. This was due to unforeseen circumstances, and Ahmed M. Kumshe, Professor, FCA, the Registrar and Chief Executive Officer, making that announcement. And so the next episode of ICAN on Air will come up on Tuesday, April 26, 2022. The time and venue remains all ICAN online, Facebook, YouTube. Go there, like it, get people to follow you, to come and share in this fount of knowledge. And it's going to be at 6 p.m. West African time. And the topic we are going to be looking at is harnessing the benefits and contribution of SMEs. Harnessing the benefits and contributions of SMEs to Nigeria's economic growth and development. I'll be having to guest with us Mr. Sheye Olurotimi. Mr. Sheye Olurotimi is the founder of MSME. He's a member of MSME Community of Practice of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. And he's also a member of the international partner of World Business Angel Investment Forum. Mr. Sheye Olurotimi is the lead consultant of Cedar Tribe Limited, a consulting and trading outfit based here in Lagos. Also a mentor and coach for Tony Elumelu Foundation, what we call the TEF in entrepreneurship program. You don't want to miss it. And we I drop my nuggets for today with you. And I quote, strategy is important, but execution is everything. Incredibly successful people focus on executing incredibly well. End of quote. That is attributable to Jeff Haddon. And so the sun sets on ICAN on Air program today to resume or rise again on April 26, 2002 as advertised. So you be the change you would like to see. And until then, I remain Akin Fatunke, your anchor, ICAN on Air program. Bye for now.